Welcome to video 4 of chapter 12. We will look at adolescence and the world of peers. So let's begin with, uh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page here. Okay, let's begin with the topic of friendship, and this is a follow-up to something I said when I was talking about middle childhood, and I said that one friendship is very important to have. That compared to having no friends, and that it doesn't matter how many you have, but you need at least one close friend. And this is a similar idea in adolescence, that one high quality friendship is more supportive than many superficial friends. And so we see this both in childhood and in adolescence, that it's very important to have at least one close friend, because that really sets the stage for the development of intimate relationships. When you have a very close friend that you share with, and um, you know, have, share your and also a self disclose with, that's kind of setting the stage for later relationships, such as later romantic relationships. You learn how to be intimate with another, whether it's the same sex, opposite sex. I mean, it's just a friendship, but you learn how to give and receive um, uh, intimate statements, and to share personal details. This is more true in female friendships that rather than males. They tend to share more intimacy, which is one of the reasons why sometimes I think that male adults are a little bit more emotionally stunted in a sense than female adults, because males don't always form intimate friendships during childhood or adolescence. And sometimes males actually may frown upon the sharing of intimacy and self-disclosing personal details. And so it's no wonder that females do this much more in childhood and in adolescence. And so they kind of learn what it's like to have a close knit, intimate relationship with another, and not all males do. Okay, both boys and girls tend to choose friends that are similar. Um, and as it says here, it's initially through selection and then through influence. And this is a point brought up by Denise Kandel, Kandel. She's mentioned in the book. And basically what she points out is that people first seek out friendships with people who are similar to them. I mean, we like people who are similar to ourselves. We like people that share similar ideas to ourselves, or share similar interests to ourselves. And then after you form a friendship, then you do things together that influence each other. And so it's very typical that friends become more similar through influence, over time. So when you look at friends, they often have many similarities. Some of them they started out with, others that they developed during the friendship. Okay, cliques and crowds. Oh, sorry, cliques and crowds. Uh, I'm just going to mention this just for a moment, but coming from Canada, I see this word, this first bold word, and I see the word clique, as does most of the rest of the world. But I will try to speak American today, and I will say clique, even though it is certainly looks like clique to me. Okay, anyways, uh, a clique is a small group of friends who spend time together to develop close relationships. Typically, you're looking at 4, 5, 6 people in a clique. It's kind of a group of a group of friends, teams that they don't always meet as a complete group, but you at times at times the group may meet in a complete way. At other times, there will be 3 or 4 members that meet at a time, but or even just two. But I mean, it's kind of the size of your of a typical friendship network, of people that hang out together, somewhere around 4, 5, 6 people. Crowds are a very different thing. This is not a group that knows knows each other or hangs out together. I mean, a crowd is a reputation-based group. So when we look at high schools, we talk about certain crowds that form, like the jock crowd, and it doesn't mean that every jock knows every other jock, but we kind of group them all together into this crowd idea. There's a crowd of jocks at the school, or a crowd of druggies, or skaters, or I don't know, nerds, or farmers. I saw it mentioned in the book, or a crowd of brains, the intellectual crowd. Uh, and so it just refers to, or the goth crowd as well. Anyways, it refers to a large group of people that share characteristics, um, even though they may not all know one another. Okay. Peer pressure tends to be subtle rather than overt. Uh, in teenage years, people aren't really pushing one another. It's the peer pressure that is often unspoken. I mean, if the rest of your clique, are all, let's say, smoking, for instance, or doing drugs or drinking. I mean, you feel the peer pressure even if no one's saying anything to you. Susceptibility to peer pressure typically peaks in early adolescence, and then decreases as adolescents get older. Um, there's a model mentioned in your textbook called the hydraulic model of peer influence, which I want to mention. And it assumes that there's a fixed amount of influence that affect teenagers. And think of, I like to call it the seesaw model. Think of a seesaw. If one side's up, then the other side's down. And if the first side's down, the other side's up. And so what this model is basically saying is that there's only so much influence. And so if there are increases in peer influence, then there will necessarily be decreases in parental influence. So if your teenager is being influenced by their peers much more, you're going to have less influence as a parent. If you can maintain a lot of influence as a parent, and so that your side of the influence seesaw is high, that means that your teenager will be less susceptible to peer pressure if you have more influence. So basically, it kind of says that there's a balance that between peer and parent influence, and if one's high, then the other's low. Okay. Young teens tend to form mixed gender groups. This is kind of like the start of the lead up, at least, to romantic relationships. So you start forming mixed gender groups and doing activities together, and then within the groups, individuals begin to pair up, and romantic relationships then develop. The way that adolescents see romantic relationships portrayed on TV, though, may leave the adolescents unprepared for the reality that they end up encountering when they're in a romantic relationship. When you watch TV, you don't really get a true sense of what a relationship is like when you watch, teenage actors, that are portraying a romantic relationship. You really don't see all the grit and the nuts and bolts of it, and the little squabbles and things like that. And so often people like that have been watching romance on TV. They go into relationships unprepared for what the reality is. Um, Teens do choose others who are similar to themselves. So this is exactly the same as with the friendships I talked about earlier, that we like people who are similar to ourselves and share interests and ideas. And so this is true for romantic relationships as well as friendships. Boys tend to choose partners about their own age. Girls often prefer somewhat older partners. Okay, let's keep going. Um, the quality of family relationships earlier in development is related to the quality of romantic relationships in adolescence. And I've talked about this idea before as well. Um, when they talk about the quality of family relationships earlier in development, they're kind of talking about, secure versus insecure attachments with parents. Remember, I told you that first attachment that you have with your parents, it kind of sets the stage. It provides a mental model or a mental blueprint for what a relationship should be. And if it's very positive, you tend to have more positive relationships later. It's kind of, you learn from from the earliest relationship you have, typically with your mother, of what a loving relationship should be. Or if it's an insecure relationship, you might learn very negative traits of relationships. So they tend to be related. But also, the quality of peer relationships is related to the quality of romantic relationships in adolescence, meaning that your friendships that you've had are also related to your early romances. And so people that have high quality friendships in childhood tend to have higher quality romantic relationships in their adolescence. And those that have maladaptive or unhealthy peer relationships tend to have problematic romantic relationships. So just as your first relationship with your parents kind of form a blueprint or a mental model, so do your early friendships. They kind of they also contribute to your idea of what a relationship should be. And so a person that grows up with, let's say, healthy relationships with their parents and healthy friendships, they tend to have good romantic relationships. If you have unhealthy or an insecure attachment with your parents and unhealthy friendships, you tend to have troublesome romantic relationships. The reason isn't hard to guess at. I mean, romantic relationships and friendships have very much in common. Um, the when we look at friendships and romantic relationships, here's some of the things they have in common. They're both voluntary. I mean, you don't choose your relationship with your parents, but you choose your friendships and you choose your romances. In both friendships and romances, you spend time together with the other person. Um, you confide in each other in both friendships and romances. You provide social support in both cases. You share intimacy with good friends, just as you do in a romantic relationship. So I mean, there's a lot of similarities. The only like real major difference is that romantic relationships have a certain intensity and a higher level of affection, you know, making them a little bit, somewhat different than your normal friendship peer relations. Um, but other than that, they mean your friendships are really setting a model for what your later relationships will be like. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention, I was going to mention earlier, but I'll just fit it in here, is that one way in which a romantic relationship differs from earlier attachment relationships is that in a romantic relationship, each partner becomes an attachment figure for the other partner. When you look at childhood attachment patterns, it's about the child becoming attached to the parent. When we talk about secure or insecure attachment, we're talking about whether the child is securely attached to the mother or caregiver, or insecurely attached to the mother or caregiver. It's more of a one-way street. I mean, the adult parent already has attachments in their life, so it's early in life. It's it's more of a one-way street, that it's the child learning about attachment and becoming attached to a parent. In romantic relationships, once you start those up in your teenage years or in adulthood, it's a two-way street. You're becoming attached to them at the same time that they are becoming attached to you, and so you are, each of you is an attachment figure for the other. Okay, I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. Dating violence. I don't usually talk too much about this, but um, just briefly go over it here. Adolescents who have been the victim of physical or sexual abuse while growing up are at an increased risk of experiencing or perpetuating violence within an intimate relationship. Certainly, the evidence points to the fact that it is a kind of a continuing cycle, and it goes back to the whole idea once again of forming mental models of what a relationship should be. So if your childhood is filled with either physical or sexual abuse, and that becomes part of your model of what a relationship is. And so even if consciously you say this is wrong, or it's wrong that I'm being abused in one way or another. I mean, and I'll never do that myself, but it allows for the possibility of perpetuating violence or abuse within a teenage or an adult relationship, because it is part of your mental model. It's kind of like, this is the way a relationship works. That's kind of what you're learning, and so it's more acceptable. And this is mainly on an unconscious level, but it still affects us nonetheless. So this is the reason. I mean, when we see these cycles perpetuate, that the things that happen to people in childhood, the people that are abused often become abusers themselves. I mean, it is all about these mental schemas, these mental models that are forming, and once again, it's not a conscious process. It's just the way your mind forms that this is what part of a relationship is sometimes getting angry and hitting the other person or abusing them. Um, Obviously, it doesn't happen in every case. I mean, um, it with a solid conscious effort, you can break the cycle, but it takes a solid conscious effort. It takes like going against what your instincts are. Okay, and this will conclude video 4 from chapter 12.